Throughout 2020, dozens of statues dedicated to slave traders and slave owners were pulled down. It was a startling reminder of just how deeply embedded the slave trade and the racism which followed in its wake are in our society. And yet, even in the most unassuming of places, you can find stories of black power and of civil rights. You just need to know where to look.
On February 2, 1847, an escaped American slave named Frederick Douglass, one of the fathers of the Civil Rights Movement, readied himself to deliver a scorching lecture about the evils of slavery to the people of this city. Inspired by the life he led and the clarity of his rhetoric, the people of Coventry responded by helping to purchase his freedom. Throughout his youth, he did everything he could to steal an education from those who would withhold it from him. He would trade bread with poor white children in return for that more valuable bread of knowledge. He would trick other kids into teaching him. He would tell local children that he could write just as well as them, and when they refused to believe him, he would challenge them to write letters in the mud and sound out the appropriate noises. Over weeks and months and years, he stole an education letter by letter, word by word. It was that experience that ultimately led Douglass to Britain and to Coventry. Armed with the power of knowledge, Douglass strived to educate others. In 1845, Douglass published his first autobiography. This harrowing account detailed his resistance in the face of brutal oppression from men like Edward Covey, a renowned slave breaker. The publication of his autobiography made Douglass a modern celebrity and highlighted the suffering that he and other slaves experienced. But the celebrity status also put Douglass at risk, and news soon reached him that his former master wanted him back. With his freedom at risk, Douglass toured Britain and Ireland. In packed auditoriums in places like St. Mary's Guildhall in Coventry, he found an audience eager to listen to his story and support his cause. He asked the women of Coventry and beyond to donate needlework to the anti-slavery bazaar in Boston to help fund his anti-slavery work. But they delivered more than needlework. They raised funds to buy Douglass his freedom and to establish his own newspaper in the US, from which he continued to educate the American public about the realities and horrors of slavery.
– 120 years after Douglass came to Coventry, a very different sort of American civil rights leader found himself in the small town of Smethwick, near the city of Birmingham in England. Here, Malcolm X was faced with the type of racism which was disturbingly similar to that which he might have found in Birmingham, Alabama. Born Malcolm Little in May of 1925, Malcolm X was exposed to the concept of Pan-Africanism thanks to his parents' adherence to the ideas of the Jamaican-born activist Marcus Garvey. Growing up in Michigan, X would later describe how he internalized the racism of that time, changing his appearance and attitudes to be more widely accepted by his white peers. His conversion to the Nation of Islam, a relatively new African-American reinterpretation of the Muslim belief system, set him on a new path, reawakening his interest in the Pan-African movement. The racism that X found here was sadly all too familiar to so many black Americans like him. In 1964, Peter Griffiths, a Conservative MP, won a parliamentary seat for this region on the back of an openly racist campaign, telling voters that if they wanted a black person for a neighbour, that they should vote for Labour. Understand that Griffiths did not use the phrase black person. I'll let you fill in that particular blank for yourself. Here on Marshall Street, where X would pose for pictures, residents demanded that the local council buy vacant houses and resell them, or let them exclusively to white families. To a black American like X, this type of white supremacist segregation must have been shockingly familiar. And to think, just a century earlier, the people of the Midlands and beyond had helped to buy the freedom of a runaway slave who preached to them a doctrine of equality. By the time that X arrived in Smethwick, he had already moved on from many of the more controversial positions he'd taken years earlier. His conversion to Sunni Islam and, in particular, the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca, had left him a changed man. far more interested in uniting peoples than in drawing lines which would separate them. This was the person who appeared here in Smethwick on that cold day of 1965. This was not the Malcolm X who rejected interracial cooperation. This was the Malcolm X who saw it as the future.